So for me, when I talk about grammar, what I'm talking about are those rules of writing that make writing clear. For me, grammar is all about clarity. If you know the rules of grammar, which what the subject agrees with the verb, where the apostrophe goes, what the tenses are, then you're able to communicate clearly and prioritize your ideas in your writing in a way that communicates to a reader. So when I say I want students to know grammar, I want them to know just enough, as a base minimum, so that they can express what they have to express with clarity to other people. And so for me, that includes things like agreement, tenses, basic sentence structure, and punctuation.
Grammar, to me, means the rules, the official rules of correct syntax. And I think it's important to distinguish between grammar and appropriate usage. I think those things get conflated sometimes. So we can ask the question, if we want students to have correct grammar, doesn't it make sense to teach them the rules of grammar? But if we say, if we want students to master appropriate usage for some given context, then we can ask the question, is the way to give students the skills of appropriate usage to teach them the rules of grammar? Well, now we've got a real question. And I think the answer to that question is no. And I think the research on that backs me up. That explicit instruction in the rules of grammar does not translate to student writing. Yes, students need to know how words fit together in a way that's meaningful. But the question is, how do we learn that? And I may just be repeating what I said before. Do we get that kind of knowledge of language usage and effective language usage through learning the grammatical rules of a language? And I would say, no, we don't. Kids don't learn that way. They learn through immersion. And that goes for non-native speakers too. ESL students want, they will say, and I'm sure you know this, just give me the rules, right? Mm-hmm. Give me the grammar rules. Mm-hmm. But that's not how language acquisition and language fluency works. Paul's basic argument, as I say in my response, I think it's fine that teachers devote a little bit of time to grammar instruction. I think that's fine, but I think we should question some of the assumptions behind that and also be realistic about what the gains are going to be.
Yeah, I would say, we don't disagree fundamentally, but I would say just from my own experience of students or children picking up language from hearing it, from using it every day, I'd say yes to a certain degree. If your parents happen to be English professors, your children will probably grow up and read at a very high level and write at a very high level, and I've seen this happen with my own children. If your parents are not, if your parents are struggling with language themselves, don't use language in a complex way or in a quote-unquote proper way regularly, then you're going to tend to pick up these very, very sloppy habits too. And while just teaching grammar is obviously not enough, I mean, just learning scales is not enough for you to play music, but it helps you to compose music if you know the scales. So I would say put those rules in and then practice them in the music, which would be the writing, the process of writing that Sean talks about. And when it comes to the research into writing and the history of teaching of writing, I bow to Sean's wisdom on this. This is his field, writing and rhetoric. It's not my field. I consulted with a professor in the education department to get sort of a quick overview of this, and I did read a couple of books on this, which did cite the decrease in writing literacy since the 1960s or so, 1966. So that's the background I have, and in Sean's essay, he supplements it with a bunch of information that I just didn't know, and I bow to him on that. As to proof that it helps students, this is going to sound horribly subjective, but I've seen it happen. Years ago, I started when I taught at the college level outside Toronto, Humber College, and then Centennial College, where I had to teach compulsory composition classes to students who wanted to be fashion models, funeral service directors, tool and die workers. And they wanted practical writing skills so that they could succeed in their businesses. By teaching them the basic rules, I demonstrated that they could improve, they could make themselves better understood in writing over the course of a semester or two, depending on how you teach it. Now, I know when I've been taught grammar in Latin classes and stuff way back when in high school, it wasn't useful at all. So I think it depends how you teach it too. It's not just turning to a grammar book and memorizing things. It has to be done within some sort of writing project that makes sense to the students. So I would try to tailor my assignments to whatever profession the students were interested in and work it in there. So a long-winded answer.
But I think you're absolutely right, and I like where you said it can be effective if you tailor it to a particular student. I think if I have a particular student who in a particular paper has all these comma splices, which sufficiently interfere with my ability to get the student's meaning, then I'll point that out to that student, right? I think it doesn't work, and I know you're not arguing this in the first place, to lecture about grammar rules to, let's say, 200 people. Because writing is a craft. It's like being a diesel mechanic or a ceramicist. You don't learn it through being told how to do it. You got to get your hands dirty. And I think that another thing I would say is, it may well be that in giving direct grammar instruction, you can in some cases see improvement on that particular skill in a student's writing. But I think an important question is, why focus on that? So for instance, if I have let's take a typical student's essay, which has, I don't know, the thesis is obvious, so it's not really worth arguing. On page 4, the student revisits something that she said on page 2 as if she hadn't brought it up yet. And in the conclusion, restates the thesis in a way that's actually better than the original one, which often happens. Students sort of write themselves into a more articulate argument. And there are comma splices. Given that paper, why focus on the comma splices?
Well, I would say the reason to focus on a comma splice is once the student finishes university, she'll never write another essay and probably never have to formulate a thesis again or a conclusion to a written argument. But she will have to write a memo to her bank about her mortgage, and she has to get it right. And if she has the rules that will prioritize her ideas within language, she has a better chance of getting it right. And yes, teaching something like, in a case like that, I too would start with a thesis and work on the argument. But like I say, since teaching how to fix a comma splice, in my experience, doesn't take very long, why not do it? Why not give the students those tools before they show up? It's like you mentioned in your essay, you said, you don't have to know the parts of an engine to drive a car. You do have to know the rules of the road, so you don't crash into other cars, right? And I think what grammar does is it makes your writing clear so that other people, the people coming at you on the increasingly strained analogy of a road here, don't smash into you, right? So that everything keeps flowing.
But I would say the rules of the road, to push the metaphor even further than it should go, are rhetorical rather than grammatical. That in both, like driving a car, when you're writing, you're trying to do something, and it's not the constitutive rules of that act that matter. It's the rules that allow you to accomplish what it is you're trying to accomplish, and those primarily have to do with the author's purpose and the audience and the context.
Yeah, which I would say in 95% of the cases is very mundane, and it's not trying to persuade someone. It is trying to just simply communicate some sort of fact or request. And for that, you don't need to know how to construct a rhetorical argument or persuade. What you need to know is how to ask a question with perfect clarity so that you get the answer you want, or the request, or whatever it is.
And that's why we're having them do literary analysis?
Well, this is why we teach them effective writing, and which why I think it would be great to carve out a little time in a high school or at some point and give them those tools early so that they can then concentrate on things like literary analysis, writing an essay when they come to the university level, and move to that sort of higher realm of thought.